Hey everybody, this is Lee McCroskey calling you once again from Nashville, Tennessee, here in Central Daylight Time. I'm excited to be with you. We are studying the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And if you've been on board for very long with LGFG, you know that we're on law number 5, which is the law of addition. Addition. So let's talk about the law of addition, because this one is absolutely critical and irrefutable for that matter. So here's the deal. Leaders add value. They do the law of addition by serving others. Leaders add value by serving others. So in a lot of my notes, I have the law of addition equals serving. Okay, now you would think the opposite. Those who are serving someone they're the followers, but that's not true. The leaders are the servers. I just finished teaching a leadership class at one of my colleges, and this whole notion of servant leadership, or the law of addition, was brought about or discovered or proposed by a guy named Robert Greenleaf, who talked about servant leadership, and it was totally revolutionary because it's the opposite of what we think about, right? We think about people who are serving. Well, they're certainly not the leaders, right? So let's talk about this. Let's jump in. I remember some years ago when I was recruiting teams with the Southwestern Company, I had one of my rookies that I just brought on board on the team. He introduced me to someone, and he introduced me like this. He said, "This is Lee. This is my boss. I work for him." And I was like, "No. That's actually not true." And he was like, "What?" I said, "I work for you. My job is to help you be successful. My job is to remove impediments from you, not the other, because I want you to do well. So I got to clear the path." So the bottom line in leadership really isn't, according to John Maxwell, isn't how far we advance ourselves, but how far we advance other people. Now, I've told you guys this before. Early on in my career, when I was in my 20s, like a lot of you, in your 20s, I could have cared less about service. I wanted to be in charge. I loved the attention. I loved to be on stage. I wanted to give orders. I wanted to run the show. I liked having a title. I liked moving up and getting promoted. I loved recognition. And I was really for all intents and purposes, I was a positional leader, and that's about it. And that's when I was in my 20s. Now, as I've progressed, and now since I'm 3 times as old as that, I've tried to orient myself a lot more toward the law of addition. So my job here at LGFG is to help you be successful. My job is to help you serve you in any way I can, okay? In a lot of ways, I've forced myself to get away from my natural orientation, because my natural orientation is not to serve people. I kind of like, hey, look out for number 1. But say at church, as a deacon at church, all the men and the deaconesses, we have women that serve too, we serve kind of behind the scenes. It forces me to get out of the limelight. And I can lead in a servant-like way. Right? This whole John Maxwell team that I got certified in, that we're teaching you from, that is an entire ministry almost is dedicated to the law of addition, the law of service. So the John Maxwell team and all the people they've trained, they want to lift people up. They want to put them first. So I hope that makes sense. This is all the foundational stuff. So let's talk about math, which is you're like, what? Let's talk about math. I don't know how many of you liked math. Who liked math when they were in school? My hand is down, but Joel did. That's great. Well, here's some basic math. You can work by addition. You can work by subtraction. You can do all the basic operations with people, all right? So if you're a leader, you're either having a positive or a negative impact on the people that you lead. So you're either adding value to them and improving their lives and causing them to do well in business, or you're taking away. So here's one, I'm going to ask you some questions today. Here's one to talk about in your groups. Big one. Are you making things better for the people who are around you? Are you making things better for the people who are around you, your teammates, the clients that you call on. Are you making their lives better? If so, you're practicing the law of addition, which is what we want. All right. You can also be a subtractor, and you probably know people that are subtractors. When I was being selfish as a young manager working at Southwestern, I got to tell you this, I'll confess this. When I recruited teams and we were out on the field selling, sometimes I didn't even really want to work with my rookies because it took away from my own personal sales, I felt. Okay. So early on, I was like, man, I just want to go out and sell. I don't want to really deal with people because they slow me down. They ask too many questions. So I think I was a subtractor. I worked by subtraction sometimes, but I got better at that. I changed my attitude. So let's draw some things. Since we're talking about math, let's draw two triangles. At one, I want you to draw, let's see, an equilateral triangle with the base at the bottom, not a right triangle. An equilateral triangle on your paper if you're taking notes, right? There you go. So 3 60-degree angles, side angle, side, 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 side. You remember all those things. So there's one triangle. And then beside it somewhere, I want you to draw another triangle that's upside down from the one you just drew. So the base is at the top, and then it gets narrower at the bottom. Okay? So you got two triangles on your paper, or you're imagining this if you're just sitting there not taking notes. So the first triangle, I want you to write these words above it. Write options and rights. Options and rights. R-I-G-H-T-S. On the other triangle above that, I want you to write the word responsibilities. Okay? Responsibilities. So what are these? What's this little diagram represent? If we're looking if you took an arrow and drew that up vertically, between those, let's talk about what these represent according to John Maxwell. Your rights and options decrease as you climb in your leadership. Does that make sense? They decrease. Your responsibilities, however, they increase as you climb into leadership positions. So think about that. If the first triangle represents your life and the base is the beginning of your leadership journey, where a lot of you are, your range of options, how you can act, it's the widest at the very beginning. The younger you are in the business or any time, the more liberties you've got with your time, what you say, how you talk, how you spend your money, how you act. But as you grow into leadership, your rights decrease and your options decrease. Does that make sense? In other words, you can't act when you're 30 years old and you have 5 people reporting to you or looking up to you as an example. You can't act the same way you did when you were 22, right? And I remember going to meetings and my behavior had to change from when I was 20 to when I was 40 as a leader in the company I used to work for. I hope that makes sense. Because if you're acting at age 40 the way you were acting when you were 22, you probably aren't being much of a leader. You're probably a subtractor. You can work by subtraction. And let me tell you this, if a leader continues to work by subtraction and has that multiplying effect, he can actually and she can actually be divisive. You can work by division. You can take all kinds of stuff away. And I've seen it happen to people. They didn't understand that you have to mature. And if you don't mature and give up some of your rights and give up some of your options and take on that responsibility, then you impact people negatively. And you can work by division, not just subtraction. Okay? So your responsibilities increase. You've got more to take care of, more to worry about. You have to make more emotionally difficult decisions about people. That's just part of leadership and management. So I want you to kind of keep those triangles in mind. I remember when we worked at Southwestern some years ago, we had a guy who had just set the company record in sales, just killed it. And he came to a regional meeting. He was probably, 23 or 22. And he got absolutely sloshed, trashed, crazed, busted furniture, went crazy at this meeting, which was even at a young age unacceptable. But as he grew in and we sort of sat down and coached him and said, listen, this is not cool. You cannot be a leader because everybody's looking to you as an example. He's like, I don't want to be an example. So, well, you set the company record. So people are looking up to you, whether you think of it or not. So we need to think about addition and not subtraction. All right. Because we don't want to emulate and multiply what you are and how you're acting right now. So he was like, okay. So anyway, it took a while. So living the law of addition, here's just a couple thoughts. If you can't give some evidence of making things better for people around you, you're probably a subtractor. And I want you to think about 90% of the people who subtract do so unintentionally. They don't do it intentionally. Think about a lot of your friends. If you just sat and took a tape recorder and turned it on and you listen to how they talk to themselves, and think of how negative it is. Their self-talk. It's like a lot of them just woke up today and went, oh crap, it's Monday. Ugh, I hate my job. Whatever. Hopefully you're not in that boat. But they're subtracting and they don't even know it. And they're affecting people around them. Okay? So let me say this. In contrast, 90%, Maxwell says, of all the people who add value, they do it intentionally. It's very intentional because typically most human beings are naturally selfish. You've heard of the what's in it for me syndrome. That's very typical. So 90% of all people who add value have to do that intentionally. It requires me to be out of my comfort zone to think about adding and serving other people. Now, it's gotten a lot more natural as I practiced it. But again, when I was younger, I could have cared less. I wanted people to be happy and I wanted to take care of my clients, but, I wanted to make money. That was the deal. So, which is first? Think about it. There are organizations who are great who've adopted servant leadership as their mantra. I think of Southwest Airlines. I think of, they've made it official. Starbucks is big. If you've ever shopped at an American department store called Nordstrom's, they are famous for living the law of addition because their mentality is how can we serve others, and how can we make that a culture in our company? So that's a question for you all. Can that become, if it's not already, the culture at LGFG? All right. So let me just throw out, since some of you are like, okay, well, this is all really nice, and we will spend other sessions on this whole notion of the law of addition and service because it's massive. But let me kind of give you a few concrete notes about things to think about and what you can do. Adding value to others is a life-changing activity. I've also mentioned it's intentional. You have to think about it. But I want everybody to think back when you have made the most significant changes or strides forward in your life. Okay? Do you have that in mind? Maybe you're going, wait a minute, I haven't moved forward much. Well, one is just joining this company that's dedicated to leadership. That's a good move. But here's what I found. Chances are, if you're like me, there was someone who inspired you or influenced you to make changes that kind of sparked those changes. And that's why as you all grow in leadership, you're going to have a chance, even though you don't feel like it, you don't know it, there are people watching you and they're taking their cues from you, if you know what I mean. Not a line, not a cue as in a line, but they're taking, you're the example for them, even though you may not know it. So here's a few thoughts. We practice the law of addition when, number one, we truly value other people. We truly value other people. I don't know how to teach you this. I don't know how you adopt this into your life. I think it's a heart issue. You have to have a heart change to care about people. But I know somebody that exemplified this, that he valued me when I was a young person. He was a great mentor. His name was Roy Lofton. And when I was 21 years old, he was my director of sales, but he spent time with me. He guided me. He corrected me. He really just, as we would say, took me under his wing and trained me. He gave me all kinds of advice. I remember he sat down before I was married and gave me marriage advice. I was like, because I was like, yeah, here's what I think marriage is going to be like. And he was like, okay, you're completely wrong. Let me correct you. And I was like, oh. So it was an eye-opening conversation. But had I not had somebody give me that advice, and it'd be weird to have my dad do that. So, you know, some of you are like, I don't know. But having a mentor or somebody, a leader that can adopt you in some way, that's how sometimes changes are made. But he valued me. So you need to think about that. How can I truly value others? My clients, the people I work with. How can I do that? Or just people that aren't even part of the business. That's a good practice. You have to practice this stuff. Okay, we practice the law of addition number 2 when we make ourselves more valuable to other people. When we make ourselves more valuable. I mean, I love being a resource for people. I like when people say, well, do you have a good book? You know, people would always wander into my office when I had this big library of books, and I'd say, well, here's one that'll help you. Here's one you can read, right? I just got a nice note the other day from Andrew who said this Men Are From Mars book is really helping. Right, Andrew? He's thumbs up. So it helps to understand and learn new things, and I enjoy kind of being in the training mode and teaching people, showing them how to improve. So the only way I knew that is to try to improve myself. So if you improve yourself and you keep growing and becoming more valuable in and of yourself, you can pass that on. So you have to make yourself more valuable. It's like having money. You know, I enjoy having money. I have plenty of money. But what money does is it gives me flexibility. That's a great reason to have a ton of money. That's a great reason to stay where you are and learn how to sell effectively. Because when you have money, guess what? You're flexible. You can give it away. You can give it to causes. You can give it to people who need help. But anyway, make yourself valuable. Then you become more valuable to other people. Law of addition. Number 3, third thought. This one's a little different, but we practice the law of addition when we know and we relate to what other people value. When we know what they value and we relate to that. Okay? So be thinking, now how does that translate into clients? To know what they value and to relate to what they value. I'll give you an example which isn't business-based, but for whatever reason, when I was writing this up and thinking about this topic, it made me think of my dad. Here's what happened, which is a vivid memory in my mind. I was sitting, when I was just a teenager, maybe 14, 15 years old, and I was listening to a new LP. This was the vinyl that you can buy again. You can buy vinyl once again. But it was a vinyl record of Black Sabbath's Paranoid album. Yes, Black Sabbath. So I had that thing cranked up in my living room, just going. And of course, my parents, who were more used to Frank Sinatra and big band, they were in the other room, and oftentimes they would encourage me to turn it down. But here's what my dad did, and I remember it. He came in and sat in the room. We were listening to War Pigs. And he listened to a couple songs with me, and he didn't criticize. He didn't say, turn this down. He just was with me. And what he did was he added value to me by not criticizing. He was trying to understand and accept what I was listening to. So in between songs, he would say stuff like, wow, who's singing? And I would say, Ozzy. And he would say, this is really distinctive. And I would say, yes, it is. And then the next song would start and we'd play. And when we finished, he was just like, well, thanks for letting me listen. And I was like, I never thought, this is really cool, Dad. And I wouldn't say that out loud, but I appreciated the fact that he knew what I valued at that time. And he was desperately attempting to relate to where I was. So that's a memory. So we can do that with teammates, with fellow LGFG members. We can practice that with clients. So I encourage you to do that. Okay? So I have some questions I'm going to send you, or I'll read them out loud, but we'll get them to you somehow. One big question I mentioned earlier: are you making things better for the people who are around you? Are you making things better for the people around you? Here's another question: How and when are you a servant leader? How and when are you a servant leader? Okay. Here's another one. When do you get impatient or resentful? It's kind of different. When do I get impatient or resentful? And here's a good question, especially for your best repeat clients and the folks you work with. What do the people closest to you value? What do the people closest to you value? If you go, I have no idea, guess what? Start becoming a student. And you might, if you're married, you might want to think about that. Or if you're engaged, what does my spouse value? If you have no idea, you have much to learn, my young Padawan learner. Okay? So this week, as we go forward, let's make it a practice to perform small acts of the law of addition, acts of service without taking credit. Because the more influence that you have, the greater your impact on others, either for better or for worse. Yeah? So, food for thought. Go think about that. Go ponder. Go gestate. Go discuss with your friends. And we'll talk again next week. In fact, next week, I already have some thoughts. We're going to talk about the law of solid ground, the law of trust. So I'm looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a fantastic week. Keep selling. Keep winning. This is Lee from Nashville signing off.